Welcome to Wasabi Interviews, where we talk to interesting people in Hawaii, Japan, and beyond. My name is Antonio Vega. I'm the editor-in-chief of Wasabi Magazine, and today I'm joined by an award-winning comedian, an actor. I believe he's coming from LA, Paul Ogata.
Yes, from California right now, but I was born in Hawaii, born and raised in Pearl City on Oahu.
Yes, yes. So I really wanted to talk to you, and there's a lot to talk about with comedy in Hawaii and just all the interesting stuff that you do. But I wanted to start off with something that just happened as of the time of this recording, like about 2 months ago, the Aloha Comedy Festival. It was the inaugural event, and you were one of the headliners. And it was also, I believe, one of the last big events before we entered this whole coronavirus shutdown and all that stuff. So how did it go? And was that your last live show before this all started?
No, it wasn't my last live show, but as
Hmm.
it was unfolding on the streets of Chinatown, you
Yeah,
could see, the energy was different
yeah.
already. Hawaii wasn't under a lockdown situation, but you could say the people who did come out were a little reticent, were a little hesitant to be
Hmm.
among other people. So it already started to turn weird
Yeah.
out there at the comedy festival. Great shows. We had big fun, but
Hmm.
shortly thereafter, all the dominoes started falling, man. And I got on a ship
Hmm.
2 days after I left
Oh,
Hawaii.
really?
Got on a
Uh-huh.
cruise ship, and at that point, they were canceling things, and I was worried I'd be stuck on a ship for a while. There are
Yeah.
still people stuck on a ship right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know about that. Huh. Yeah. So that were you doing shows on the ship?
Yeah, I did a show on, I want to say, the freedom of the seas in the
Hmm.
Caribbean, and then I went on another ship immediately after that, and
Hmm.
that's when everything just started falling apart. They
Yeah.
I was supposed to go to another ship after that, but they told me no, you're sticking around for a second week on this ship while
Hmm.
everything else gets sorted out. Then they told me no, you're getting off the ship tomorrow. We're flying you home. So
Hmm.
I was lucky to make it out. It's almost like the last helicopter out of Hanoi, Vietnam.
Yeah. So I guess like everybody else, you've just been stuck at home pretty much, aside from maybe the supermarket.
Yeah, the supermarket, and we adopted a puppy. We went to the
Oh, okay.
shelter, and
Uh-huh.
we got an Akita puppy. It's a
Oh, that's
Japanese
cute.
dog.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, that's not how I planned my dogs. I don't look for Asian dogs. It just worked out that way.
Only Asian dogs.
Right? It worked. The
uh,
last two dogs I had were Asian dogs. Another was Akita, and then the one before that was Chow. So it does
uh-huh.
seem maybe I'm a little racist in my dog preferences, but that's not true. It's not true.
uh, so I guess house training and all that has been keeping you busy.
Yeah, it's quite a handful. He's still got his sharp teeth, so I'm covered in holes and scratches. I look like Victor Zsasz from Batman, covered in uh, wounds. Anyway, what a nerd reference.
Well, hey, it's good to have something keeping you busy at this point. I've heard of many comedians saying like, "Oh, my wife, my kids, they're going crazy because I keep, cracking jokes and all that," and they're like, "No, you need to get on stage."
I feel so bad for these. Some comedians rarely
Yeah,
ever get to see their families, and now they're
yeah,
stuck with them at home, and
yeah.
they don't know what to do. They've never had to be a father before or a husband.
Yeah, they're all like, "Oh, enough, dad. We don't need to hear that again," you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gone probably about half the year to 2/3 of the year
Mhm.
normally anyway. So this
Yeah.
I see this as a real good opportunity to hang out with my wife, who I miss
Oh,
all
that's
the time
wonderful.
when I'm traveling.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. So of course, comedian, and you did radio in Honolulu as well, and acting, and but before that, it seems like you had an interest in kind of electric things in video games. And one thing that I read was that at the age of 13, you wrote a video game. Like, could you explain what game was it? What did you do?
Well, it's when I was a kid,
Yeah.
other kids my age were out playing sports. But
Hmm.
what I did is I went to Leeward Community College and took a programming class. And yeah, it's weird. What
Uh-huh.
what business does a kid have to do in college? It's
Yeah.
very Doogie Howser. Um, but I learned Basic. That was a programming language.
Yeah.
Stone tools, man. And now, at that time, the most advanced language was COBOL, which
Yeah.
now is still stone tools, and governments are still using programs written in COBOL to
Right.
get out these the stimulus checks, and no one, they can't find programmers. It's such an old language. It's
Uh-huh.
like if the government said, "Does anybody know how to read and write cuneiform?" Uh, Egyptian hieroglyphics. We need to get no. So it's kind of like that. But I
Yeah.
learned coding, and
Yeah.
I wrote it on the Texas Instruments TI 99 4A, which at
Right.
the time was promoted in ads and commercials by Bill Cosby. So I thought, wow, this has to be a reputable thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And but it's so archaic. There wasn't a hard drive. There was a tape recorder,
Oh,
and
wow.
you'd plug the tape recorder into the computer and
Uh-huh.
press record, and
Yeah.
like the fax tones, you hear the
Right.
computer would talk to the tape recorder, and that's how you'd save programs and data, is on a cassette tape.
Oh,
uh,
wow.
it's you can't wrap your head around this. What are you,
Yeah.
7? You look
No, I
into.
mean, I'm familiar with like, floppy disks. I grew up with, that was my first exposure to it, but I hadn't seen the actual like recording to a tape like that.
The look on your face is awesome. It's like, tell us about the telegraph, Grandpa.
Beep, 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 beep.
Yeah. So here's the game. Here's the plot.
Uh-huh.
Severed heads would fall from the sky, and you'd
Awesome.
have to.
Okay.
Your character was on the ground, running around trying to catch all the heads as they fell. And
Uh-huh.
if you drop too many heads, your head would fall off, and the game would be over. Pretty grim. Pretty grim.
Yeah, and what was the name of the game?
I think it was called Catching Up, and
Okay.
I,
Innocent.
I think that's what it was called. But yeah, so grim when you think about it, and ahead of its time, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're pushing the envelope. So then you go to college though, and you also studied electrical engineering for a bit, right? But
Yeah, got into the
um,
College of
yeah.
EE, yes,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
at the University of Hawaii, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of what my family always told me I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's what I really wanted to do, but that's what they said. Oh, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be an electrical engineer, and you're going to work at an engineering firm in Hawaii, and that's I guess that's how uh, things work in small town in Hawaii. Your
Mm-hmm.
parents tell you what you want to do, and that's what you do.
Yeah, yeah.
But really, I lasted maybe a year and a half there before I realized that's numbers and that hard work. It sounds like not something I need to do. So
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
kicked around, changed majors a couple times, and
Mm-hmm.
then I settled on speech and
Uh-huh.
communications,
Makes
which,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, there's two other people who I went to college with and got the same degree. One is a waiter, and
Mm-hmm.
one is an art historian. So very
Interesting.
helpful degree, as you can see.
Well, I mean, I don't know if most comedians really gravitate towards math and all that. You guys are talkers interacting with people. You want to see those reactions, right? Whereas electrical engineering, not so much, right?
Yeah, I guess. And it's the whole left right brain thing. You're wired a certain way, and I
Yeah.
really wasn't wired that way. Even
Mhm.
even in my basic computer programming attempts, it was still the other side of the brain. You're trying to catch severed heads. It's not. I didn't write an accounting platform or a tax software. It
Right,
was
right.
very. Uh, you could see which way I was leaning, I guess.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I'd much rather be talking to people like this than doing math, doing the accounts and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So then, what came first though? Because I saw that you did do like radio DJ right here in Honolulu, but when did you get into comedy? Like, how did that all come about?
Well, when I was a kid, I was always a performer. I was the
Mhm.
class clown in school and in my family. I originally wanted to be a magician. I
Mhm.
had all of the tricks that you buy at the store, and I
Yeah,
do shows for the family at
sure.
holidays. But uh, ultimately, it just didn't ring true. It's kind of magic is a lie. Nothing magicians do,
Mhm.
they're actually doing. They're fooling you. It's a
Yeah.
lie. Uh, so I don't know. I moved away from that,
Mhm.
and then I discovered comedy, and I thought, wow, this is amazing because it's true, or a version of the truth,
Mm-hmm.
twisted into a delightful riddle and presented to you that way. It's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was the opposite of magic, and
Right.
I got into that. I loved that. I bought all the comedy albums when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Bumatai was the only comedian in Hawaii, and I
Right.
bought all of his records.
Mm-hmm.
See, a record, young man, is a piece of
I'm,
circular plastic.
it's black and it's big. It's
Yeah,
like a big CD, right?
yeah, it's a big black CD.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then when I was in high school, Eddie Murphy came out with his amazing special that
Yeah.
me and all my friends we learned all the words and we do it verbatim
Right.
along with the uh, tape. Oh God,
Mhm.
you're making me feel old. Um, so out of
Oh
high
no.
school, I went to the University of Hawaii, and that's where I first started doing stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And then years later, became a radio DJ.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of morning shows in Hawaii.
Okay. So were you doing stand-up shows at the same time as the DJing?
Yes,
Mm.
the uh, before the radio thing, I
Mhm.
actually opened a comedy club in Waikiki
Oh, wow.
at the Ilikai Hotel,
Uh-huh,
and it was
uh-huh.
open for about a year before it went down in a big ball of flames, and I realized I'm not really cut up to be a businessman.
Right.
Again, right left brain thing. Whatever
Sure.
side is the don't do business side. That's me. That's what
Yeah.
I'm on.
Yeah.
And I uh, met my wife there at the hotel. So that was,
Okay.
that's
Hey,
the
hey.
good thing that came out of that
Yeah.
debacle.
Mm-hmm.
But also after the business shut down, I read in the newspaper, I think it was a Wayne Harada column, where
Mm-hmm.
he talked about how Kimo Kahuano got fired from Crater 96.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a letter to the general manager, Austin Valley at the time, and I said, I'm the kind of guy that likes to take advantage of other people's misfortunes.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent him a tape of me doing stand up,
Uh-huh.
recorded at the Ilikai, and he
Yeah.
said, "Oh, this sounds good. Come on in, and we'll give it a test."
Mm-hmm.
And 1 week turned into 2 years there,
Mm-hmm.
and then I switched over, started a new station with Kid Leo
Mm-hmm.
on 102.7 The Bomb, which I think is still it's still out there right now.
Yeah. Huh. So, then at what point did you decide, all right, this is going well, but I want to, take it to the next level, and then I guess that's when you decide to go to LA, right?
Yeah, the longer I did comedy while I was doing radio,
Mm-hmm.
I found myself going more frequently to Los Angeles to perform, to do shows
Mm,
at the Ice House or the Laugh Factory.
mm-hmm.
And it was at that point, towards the end of my years in radio, the owner of the Laugh Factory opened a location in Waikiki at the Queen
Oh.
Kapiolani Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought me in to sort of be the house MC, and then I do shows there of my own
Mm-hmm.
occasionally at the Laugh Factory. And the Jamie Masada, the owner in Hollywood, came down, saw me at the Waikiki location, and said, "Well, I'd really like to help this guy out." And he'd let me get on stage at his club. He got me on TV, a spot on the Late Late Show.
Mm-hmm.
He got me in a movie with Damon Wayans, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, so now it's happening, and either I move now
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
not move at all.
Yeah.
So I took that opportunity to hand in my resignation at the radio station,
Mm-hmm.
sold my house, and moved to California.
Hmm. Who was the host on the Late Late Show at the time?
That was Kilborn, Craig Kilborn.
Kilborn. Wow. Yeah. Okay, that was a while ago. That was
Yeah. And shortly after I did his show, he announced his retirement. It's coincidental once again. I don't think one had anything to do with the other.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. Cool, cool. So, okay, that was around 2006. Am I right?
I quit my job at the end of 2005, yeah,
Oh, okay.
and moved to California in 2006.
Mm-hmm. So, it seems like you were already pretty well set up to just kind of keep going with the flow by the time you got to LA, right? It wasn't like a huge transition.
Yeah, a lot of times comics will struggle
Mm-hmm.
for years trying to get from doing open mics to getting an open spot to doing a feature spot, then to the headline spot. But I was lucky, I guess, like a lot of things in life, I just fall backwards into the uh, top position. So I started headlining clubs immediately
Oh, wow.
based on the help of the Laugh Factory and the fact
Wonderful.
that he'd already gotten me in to do late night TV and movies. So yeah, I skipped. So like in radio, I skipped right to doing the morning show. Oftentimes, people work uh, decades before they get a shot at afternoons, and then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people never even get to do uh, morning radio. So I
Mm.
think I've been pretty lucky throughout
Mm-hmm.
whatever I've done in life to sort of skip ahead.
Mm-hmm. Is that just are you just good at getting along with people, making a good first impression? Like what do you think?
Well, I try not to. I don't know. I try to treat people how I would want to be treated. Try to.
Mm.
It's the golden rule.
Yeah.
You just be nice. Try to be nice to most people. That's, I
Right.
guess, is the credo I go by.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I hear like, for example, a lot of actors, they say you're going to be working with this person like maybe 6 months or something if you're working on a movie. So you want to work with people you like, right?
Which is why a
So,
lot of times you see
yeah,
the same actors in the movies over and over and over again. Like
yeah.
in a Judd Apatow movie, it's always the same crew of people.
Right, right, right. Yeah, no, those guys seem like they're always having fun together. So
Yeah,
they're always looking for an excuse to do something else, right? Um, okay, so I was watching this one interview that you did. It was probably a few years ago, but you mentioned this one time when you came back to Hawaii and you did this show at a big theater, and your dad said, like, oh, he was, he said something very nice to you, even though typically it seems like he's not a very expressive person. But do you know what I'm referring to? Do you
yeah.
remember? Yeah, could you explain that?
There's a lot of good things have happened to me in
Mhm,
comedy. I've met heads of state,
mhm,
celebrities. I've done shows uh, for the military on aircraft carriers. I got
mhm,
to land on an aircraft carrier, take off. It just really incredible, amazing things. But the best thing that ever happened to me was at the Hawaii Theater with
mm,
my dad. And I don't
mhm,
know if it's an Asian American thing, a Japanese American thing,
mhm,
where there isn't a lot of show of affection. My dad never told me, "Hey, son, I love you
mhm.
and I'm proud of you."
Yeah.
Uh, I assume that it's a Asian American thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, I think it's a very Japanese thing, and then maybe that kind of transfers down the generations.
yeah.
Uh-huh,
So I did. They came. My parents came to that theater, sold out show at the Hawaii Theater,
uh-huh.
and I did a joke about how he never said that to me.
Yeah.
And my mom, the next night at dinner, they
Mhm.
invited me over. My mom dragged my father over, almost by the by the scruff of his neck,
Uh-huh.
and said, "Well, don't you have something to tell him?" And my dad, and my dad looked at me and was like, "Ugh, I love you." And then my mom slapped him and she said, and he goes, "Oh, and I'm proud of him. What does he want?" And that was the best thing that ever happened to me
Oh, that's
because of
nice.
comedy.
Yeah, no, that's really nice. I mean, I think even beyond Asian Americans, I think we all have those moments where it's tough to just kind of be honest with our feelings, but sometimes you need that little push, right?
You know, but I grew up on TV, and
Yeah.
all the families on TV, every episode, the father would tell the sons,
Yeah.
"Son, I love you. Oh, I love you too,
Yeah.
Dad. Oh, son, I'm
Yeah.
proud of you. Ah, thanks, Dad." But I never had that, and I always watched TV
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
"Wow, what's that like? I wish that would happen in reality."
Yeah, yeah, like Full House or whatever, they'd call the kids over, say, "All right, let me tell you a little story. I love you, Michelle."
Yeah, courtship
Yeah.
of Eddie's father. People, let me tell you about my best friend. It's just it was fiction to me until that day, and it was forced, but I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah.
I put that
Oh,
away right in here, and it's been a wonderful memory.
oh, that's great. That's great. So do you get to come back to Hawaii much, or is it just kind of work things mainly?
Yeah, I get back. Here's
Mhm,
the secret:
mhm.
always travel on someone else's dime.
Ah, uh-huh.
Especially as a comedian, I can do that quite a bit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Whenever I'm doing shows for the military, they'll fly me out. If I'm doing shows on a cruise ship, they'll fly me out. A lot of shows I do overseas in Australia or Hong Kong or China,
Mhm.
they'll fly me out to do the shows there. And
Yeah.
so I try to get back to Hawaii once or twice a year.
Mhm.
Before the Aloha Comedy Festival, I
Mhm.
think the previous time that I was in Hawaii was it was for my wife's father's funeral in late 2018.
Mhm.
We so I was there. We just planned some shows anyway,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then before that, it was I was doing a show for orchid growers
Oh.
during the big fake North Korean missile crisis.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was, oh my goodness. So I'm in my
Uh-huh.
hotel room,
Yeah, yeah.
and it starts. There's a speaker in the room that I didn't know existed, but it started blaring. There's a nuclear missile from North Korea coming. We'll tell
Uh-huh.
you when we know more. And then
Yeah,
I woke up to that, like what? Because my phone didn't ring. I guess it was
yeah.
registered to a California address, so I didn't
Right,
get
right.
the emergency notification.
Yeah.
And so I'm freaking out. I'm looking around. I looked out the hotel window. People are throwing things in their cars, speeding out. What's happening?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So by the
Did
time I found out on Twitter, of all
yeah,
places,
yeah.
it was all a hoax. Uh,
Did
so
your
I
wife
missed
call?
out. I was robbed of the opportunity of last thoughts. I didn't get a chance to call my wife and say, "Oh, it's been a fun ride. I love you." I didn't get any of that. I just woke up with a hotel announcement that came too late.
I actually slept through the whole thing, and then I afterwards I go like, wait, what happened?
You missed it.
Yeah, I told. Yeah, I think my phone is registered to Florida still, so I think that's why it didn't go off. So I just slept through the whole thing, and then later, like a friend of mine, like said, "Oh, did you hear what happened?" Like, no.
You didn't have the opportunity to throw your relatives down into the sewer and the storm
No,
drains.
no, I didn't have that wonderful opportunity to panic
Oh,
like everyone else. Uh, okay, so you get to do comedy in all these different places. Like I saw you've done quite a bit in Singapore. I saw, for example, you did a TEDx talk in Hong Kong, and you filmed, I think, your special in Hong Kong. How is doing comedy in these other places, right? Because I think for most of us here in the U.S., we think, oh, stand-up comedy, it's such an American thing. But what about like over in Asia? Like, is it popular? Is it getting more popular? Like, how is it over there?
it's typically where the Brits are.
Mm-hmm.
Comedy is huge. They
Mm,
love it. They can't get enough of it. London's a great comedy city.
mm-hmm.
So Hong Kong was a British colony
Mm-hmm.
until '97. They turned it back over to China, but there's still a lot of expats, British expats there,
Mm-hmm.
and they love comedy. So
Yeah.
the entire region. Uh, Australia used to be
Mm,
a British prison colony, and so
yeah.
there's a lot of love for stand up there too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hong Kong, Singapore, a lot of expats. But when I do shows in places like Malaysia, that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because it's mostly locals that come to the show,
Oh, okay.
and you have a different uh, vision for what they think is funny, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to you're just if I was speaking to Brits or Americans or Aussies or Canadians somewhere, it's pretty much the same experience that
Mm-hmm.
I'm relaying to them. But man, when you're talking to completely local, uh, international crowds, it's quite an interesting thing to then try and tweak and massage your message to fit a different I don't know, situation, I guess.
Sure. So does that mean then, I guess, now you've done it many times, so you've got a pretty good idea of what works in those kind of situations. But at the beginning, is it a lot of trial and error?
It definitely is, yeah. Even still on a nightly basis.
Mm-hmm.
I prior to the whole shutdown of the planet, I
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of time to do open mics.
Mm.
Open mics are nights where amateurs and professionals can come to try new material or work on old material. If, in the case of amateurs,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have that because I'm always doing shows,
Mm-hmm.
paid shows. So
Mm-hmm.
what I then do is I try new material within these regular shows.
Mm.
Uh, so there is still a lot of trial and error, a lot of guesswork. You
Mm-hmm.
get better at the guesswork, but
Mm-hmm.
you always also get told no every now and then. That nope,
Mm.
try again. That wasn't funny, and so you
Yeah.
take that joke back and you tinker with it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and try to make it work.
Are there certain places where crowd work, for example, just doesn't work so well, or is it pretty universal?
In my experience, it's fairly universal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes culturally,
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to be put on the spot and have to speak in front of others.
Sure, sure, yeah.
China
Mm-hmm.
is kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
When
Mm-hmm.
I would do shows in not Shanghai uh, or Beijing,
Mm-hmm.
but in the smaller cities, Suzhou
Mm-hmm.
or Nanjing, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times they don't. They just want to hear your thing, and not be
Mm-hmm.
part of it.
Right.
I had a French guy come to a show in Hong Kong, and I was trying to get into it with him,
Mm-hmm.
discover what he was all about, and he got violent with me.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Did he want to like get on stage?
No, he was sitting in the front row, and
Mm.
that's the thing. What at comedy shows they tell you don't sit in the front row. The comedian will talk to you.
Sure,
This
yeah.
guy sat right in the front row and was glaring at me the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think he was very much not at ease in that situation. I don't know why he sat in the front row.
Yeah.
It's like
Huh.
he didn't want to get wet. Don't go sit in the front row at SeaWorld. It's you can't punch Shamu after the show because you got wet.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's common knowledge. Anybody, if anybody watching this, has never heard of that, now you know. Now you
But
know.
I will say
Yeah.
this: two things I'll say.
Yeah.
I don't really get out there and try to confront people and
Sure. Yeah.
make fun of them. I don't get
Mhm.
up there and say, "Hey, look at your shirt. What does your house not have mirrors?" I don't do stuff like that. I try
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make fun with somebody. I try to celebrate
Mhm.
what it is that they do. I don't try to put them down for their job. I try to find the awesome things about their lives and their jobs, and then dovetail it from there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, with that being said, yeah, I poke the tiger quite a bit, and sometimes the tiger will snap back, like the French guy in Hong Kong.
So, what do you find then challenging? Like every time you get on stage, is it always like a new experience? What are you trying to do to like keep it fresh every time you go on?
I like to collaborate with the audience.
Mm.
You call it crowd work,
Mhm.
but I think it's something deeper than that.
Mhm.
It's finding what this specific group of people can enjoy and celebrate in a different way.
Mm.
Uh,
Mhm.
there's not always going to be a plumber in the front row from Michigan whose daughter has a mohawk, but that one night we might discover that, and that'll become
Yeah.
the impetus for a whole 10 to 15-minute chunk of material
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we create, me and the audience.
Right.
Um, so that I love the idea that anything can happen at a
Mhm.
show. Um,
Yeah.
at my show. There's some comedians who will do their written act verbatim from A to Z, and I admire that. I can't do that. I'm not wired for that. That's like electrical engineering. I don't have
Right.
that lobe of the brain.
Yeah. 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 So I guess to me it sounds like you approach it almost like a puzzle every time, right? It's a new little surprise every time, and trying to figure it out and making it work just gives you that kind of rush to keep going.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's very much a puzzle. When I was a kid, I loved Games Magazine. I don't know if that still exists
Mm-hmm.
to this day, but it was puzzles. It was
Mm.
games. It was crosswords, and it's all how do we make this work? It's
Mm-hmm.
uh it's like Tetris.
Yeah.
When I do a show, it's like Tetris. Oh, I need a piece that looks like this, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'll try and elicit that from the audience, and then we build a different thing that way. Now
Yeah.
sometimes they don't want to talk, or they're just not as into it or as interesting as
Yeah.
I would hope, and so there's things that I know that I want to say
Mm-hmm.
anyway. So
Yeah.
then I'll just sort of veer into that, and we'll go that way.
What about like on a cruise ship? Like you have a captive audience there. Is that good? Is that bad?
It's good because sometimes on some ships I'll do 14 shows in a week,
Wow.
and people will come back. I've seen people come back 8, 9 times in a week.
Huh.
So it is good sometimes
Yeah.
if because you create sort of super fans that way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as opposed to them being only able to see you once in a week
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then never again. Now they've seen you 8 times in 6 days, and
Yeah.
they're forsaking everything else on the ship. They don't go to bingo; they come to the comedy show to
Oh,
see
that's
the show
great.
again,
Uh-huh.
and I like that. But
Well,
it could
that's
be bad if things
uh-huh.
don't go well.
Yeah.
Then now you're stuck on a ship with these people who know that you had a bad day at work, and you
Yeah.
can't be at the buffet on the ship, and you see people and they look at you. You're like, oh, they know
Yeah.
that's me. So when I go out, I always wear a hat and big glasses and
Mm-hmm.
dark glasses.
Yeah.
I'm really the only chubby Asian my size on the ship, so It doesn't matter what kind of disguise I put on. They know who it is.
Yeah. Well, nowadays you can wear a mask too, so
Yeah, they'll know. They'll know.
they'll know. So one last thing area that I wanted to ask you about. So you got to know Andy Bumatai. You mentioned him earlier. Of course, he very well known comedian here in Hawaii. I guess was it that just through your work in comedy, and then you got to know him and develop a relationship with him?
Absolutely. As I said,
Hmm.
admired him. He was my idol when
Hmm.
I was a kid. Then he left Hawaii. He went and did shows on the mainland, toured
Hmm.
with Tom Jones, and did his own thing. Had a Showtime special.
Hmm.
It was awesome to see him do that stuff.
Hmm.
When he was done with that, he moved back to Hawaii and started his own show uh, in Waikiki, and that's
Hmm.
where I got to meet him. He was
Mm.
he brought me under his wing.
Hmm.
He showed me, taught me a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and then I also was helping him write material for a new project that he was doing.
Hmm.
And then he got TV roles. So some gigs that he couldn't do, he asked me to fill in for him. And I'm like, oh my
Oh.
goodness, I don't have an hour of material. So I somehow stretched
Yeah.
15 minutes into an hour. And it wasn't the best, but
Yeah.
the fish only grows as big as the tank it's in.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful for him
Yeah.
for providing me with a bigger tank. And it
Yeah.
was, and so to this day we're good friends, and I cherish his mentorship and his friendship.
Hmm.
It's sometimes they say you don't want to meet your heroes,
Hmm.
but in this case, I'll do it again every day, every time. Uh,
Yeah.
when I was starting out, there was
Hmm.
one comedy club in Waikiki,
Yeah.
and when Andy opened shop, he asked me and a couple of other comics to come over to his place and do the show with him. And the
Hmm.
owner of the comedy club told us, if you go there, you can't ever work here again.
Huh.
And I was like, okay, uh, because that's your hero. So I left.
Yeah.
Uh, and so me and Augie Talbot and another guy, Kento, who
Hmm.
lives in Las Vegas now, we all left and we did shows with Andy and
Hmm.
never looked back. It was beautiful. It was wonderful uh, to see guys like Augie and Lanai and
Mm.
Lee Cataluna and
Hmm.
Hawaiian Ryan. We all
Hmm.
started around the same time, and it was a wonderful little incubator of talent.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's wonderful. I mean, oftentimes, like you said, you don't want to meet your heroes because, you see them as an actor, as a comedian on stage, but then you don't know how they're going to be in person. But it's nice to hear that, he was so supportive.
Yeah, because Tom Hanks, by all appearances,
Hmm.
seems like the nicest guy. But
Uh-huh.
I'll bet if I was stuck in Australia in quarantine with him, I would have come back with a different story and be like, you know what, Tom Hanks is, I don't like him.
Yeah, yeah. And we all have our bad moments, right? And then unfortunately when you're a public figure, like one person will judge you for that 1 second interaction for the rest of your life too, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And we through
I
my
think
window.
traffic is a safe exception. We all have the traffic moments. Well, Paul, you've been very delightful to talk to today. So I think people will come off with a nice impression of you after this. So, woo! So, if people want to check out your stuff or follow you or whatever they want to do, like, where do you want to direct them?
Well, if you go to paulogata.com, you can
Hmm.
find me there, my schedule. If I ever get back to doing shows again,
Yeah.
you'll you'll know when and where it is.
Uh-huh.
But on Twitter at Paul Ogata, Instagram at Paul Ogata. If you want to follow me on Venmo, it's
Hmm.
at Ogata. That's it. And
Nice. Okay.
just I
Uh,
hope to see you at a show soon when they
yeah.
cancel the apocalypse.
I love stand-up comedy, and I unfortunately I've been living in Hawaii for some years now, but I haven't gone out. But the Aloha Comedy Festival looked very interesting, so I'd love to go check them out when they hopefully do a second round next year, maybe, or we'll see. But yeah,
Whenever the
um,
shelter in place thing gets canceled, yeah, that's when we'll do
exactly.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
Until
yeah.
then, everyone stay in your house and be safe and live
Yeah,
for another day.
exactly.
As they say in Hawaii, ua mau ke ea o ka aina I corona. And
Woo, yeah. Thank you, Paul. And guys, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, bye, Paul. Thank you.
see ya.